According to the ECB's forecasts, how many years will it take for our economies to close the scars of the pandemic and return to where they were in 2019?
So there's no doubt in the near term, it's a difficult situation. Many parts of the European economy have some kind of lockdown measure right now. What we think is this is more maybe delaying the recovery rather than a major long-term problem. So I think we still think that by the middle of next year, so maybe towards the end of the summer of 2022, we will have returned to 2019 GDP.
Does these projections include Greece as well?
So what I'm focusing there is on the overall European aggregate picture. Now, of course, for economies like Greece, the recovery will, of course, be heavily dependent on the recovery of tourism, for example. Again, this depends on the speed of the vaccination campaigns.
Mm-hmm. Will the recovery be an easy process? Is there a risk of a new financial crisis following the pandemic?
Essentially, the pandemic is an artificial type of recession. We know a lot of the recession is because we have to suspend normal economic activity. When that suspension is over, there can be a strong recovery. But as I mentioned to you, if you have been losing income in this period because your restaurants, your hotel, your service industry has been compromised, of course, that income is a loss to you.
Regarding Greece, the end of the pandemic will find the country with a debt-to-GDP ratio of more than 200% and possibly still without an investment grade. So do you think that after almost 10 years of economic crisis and adjustment programs here in Greece would need a new program?
First of all, the most important point to mention is this has been necessary. It has been inescapable that in a pandemic, the government has to do a lot. And in that context, I think it is a very natural reason why public debt has increased. And in the case of what we see a low interest rate environment. So that the ability to finance this debt, the ability to service this debt is, we think, even at high debt levels, is much easier than before. That does not remove the longer term issue that high debt levels will need careful monitoring and they will be more easily managed, over the long term. The more quickly does the economy grow, the more reforms are introduced over time to support a fast-growing economy.
Last March, Mario Draghi wrote in the Financial Times that we face a war and that wars are financed by increases in public debt. That is what we're seeing, that's what's happening. Do you think that the return to normality could or should include the cancellation of debts, private, as Mr. Draghi has suggested, and or public, as some others are saying?
Prospect of a lot of unsustainable debt in the private sector has been curtailed by the amount of fiscal support. And then let me go back to what I said already. The most important issue is, in a world of very low interest rates, then the capacity to manage this debt is much greater than maybe was envisaged last March. And of course, again, to reiterate the bottom line, the cancellation of public debt, is not part of the treaty for the ECB. And more generally, I think the focus much more should be on re-emphasizing the importance of the role of the government at this point, the importance of the EU common funding, which we have in place, the importance of accelerating growth rates after the pandemic, and to put all of that in the context of this is, as you say, a really large event like a war. It's temporary. We know it's only going to last another year and a half in terms of its main economic impact.
Well, Mr. Lane, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.